Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 26 for November 25, 2016. Hey everybody, Dan Rubino here, joined again by Zach Bowden for another episode of the Windows Central Podcast, this post-Thanksgiving Friday, also known as Black Friday in the United States. Is it Black Friday in the UK, or
Pretty
you guys
much,
just...
Yeah, a few years ago that wasn't a thing here, but you Americans are pretty influential apparently. So yeah, we have Black Friday now and it's chaos.
Sorry to hear that. I don't actually even venture outside of my abode on Black Friday.
It's all online.
It's actually kind of sad. There's nothing I want on Black Friday. Like, my life is just full of technology year round, so there's like no deals for me. I just got another laptop this afternoon, so reviewing this probably either next week or the week after. It's the Dell XPS 13 with Kaby Lake, also known as the Rose Gold Edition. I'll make that.
I got a new laptop too. I got HP Spectre.
HP. I love how you say it.
That's what we say. It's how you say it. It's not my fault you can't say it right.
if you say so. But anyway, this week we'll be talking about Project Neon, which is a story we just broke on the previous Friday, the HP laptop, and Cobalt, Project Cobalt, another code name that leaked out, and the HP Spectre X360. So not a lot of news happened this week, as probably expected with the holiday week. So it's basically Thursday's Thanksgiving in the United States, and then Friday's Black Friday. So not a whole lot going on. Microsoft themselves a lot of them are on vacation, taking a week off. So no new builds either. Kind of expected around the holidays. Not going to be having too much probably for the next few weeks either. I'm sure there'll be a couple more insider builds, but leading up to Christmas and New Year, it'll definitely slow down a bit. And then we kick off the New Year as we make the final corner, I guess, going into Redstone 2, also known as the Creators Update. But we're already moving on beyond RS2. We're interested now in RS3, and we're hearing about RS4 even, which is kind of crazy because that's not till 2018. Zach, let's talk about Project Neon. We broke this story on Friday. We've been hearing about it for a little while now. Evidently, some other people have heard about it too in the dev community, people who work closely with Microsoft. And what is Project Neon?
So Project Neon is Microsoft's code name for a new design language scheduled for around Redstone 3, maybe. It's scheduled for a wide area thing. So we could start seeing the early bits of Project Neon and its new design language show up with Redstone 2. Then the bulk of Project Neon we're expecting in Redstone 3, and then more changes and stuff in Redstone 4. So it's quite a long journey for this project. So the new design language, details are still pretty scarce as to what we should be expecting, but we do know that it will be looking at making animations and transitions far more smooth and better for a more fluid user interface, which would be excellent, as right now the current design language, which is referred to as Microsoft Design Language 2, is kind of static compared to the old Windows 8 Metro UI, which was very fluid, very nice, and animations. Like, it felt like a very complete design, whereas Windows 10 is kind of all over the place. It's very inconsistent. Developers have kind of been let free to do what they want with their apps, and it doesn't make for a nice experience, in my opinion, and many on the internet as well. Not only that, I think you want to jump in with this bit.
Yeah, so, and we should be kind of clear. It's what's not happening, we don't think. There's no, Windows 10 is not changing at its core.
No.
And the fonts may change a little bit or something like that, but there's no, huge UX changes, we don't think, that's coming. This isn't like Windows 10 is just going to look completely different, like the shift from 8.1 to 10. It's not like that. And as we posted the story, then some more info we got our hands on after that seemed to, and I confirmed this with a second source later, that this seems to be Microsoft's plan for building a UI that can jump from desktop to augmented reality and to HoloLens. And that's really interesting because in the past we've talked about, say, Continuum, which is this concept of taking the desktop and bringing it to mobile and vice versa, right? So we have the mobile thing. And then there's also tablet mode too, which was referred to as Continuum for a while. So this idea of a UI and a UX, user experience, being able to jump from different platforms. And one thing we haven't really heard about, although it's kind of important if you think about it, is how does Windows 10 exist on HoloLens? Now, if you have a HoloLens, I do, but and some other people do too. There is a UI there, right? There is like that start screen. There are some basic elements, but there's no unifying principles and guidance behind that right now. And so it's kind of like free reign, right? And Unity apps run like video games, so they just take up the entire HoloLens screen, right? You can't run apps. So, things like games don't really need their own UI, but programs kind of do. Right now, they look like just Windows, windowed apps basically. But this idea of like how you take a UI and user experience from the desktop and carry the similar aspects of it over for augmented reality, virtual reality, that kind of stuff, I think is what the goal of this project is. And it's, in that sense, it's really interesting. We've heard some weird things about it, like basically think of gaming and gaming worlds, I think how they use UIs like in the future and stuff. And if you look at Microsoft's Future Visions video, you can see like a woman like looking out the window, and then there's like, like holograms on the window and stuff like that, part of the UI. And this idea that the operating system adapts to the world you're in. And I think that's the stuff they're going for. We expect some more details, I guess, on this in the coming weeks, hopefully. Some prototyping elements should appear in RS2, so we may start to see little bits of this there. Some people have said 3D Paint actually seems like it has some new stuff in it, and so that, and I'm shaking my camera, unfortunately, but that may be some aspects too. So not a lot of details right now, but definitely interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more excited about the very fluid description that we received, because right now I'm in the camp of Windows 10 is very static. It doesn't look, I mean, it looks okay, but it's very sort of simplistic, which is, to be fair, is the MDL2 design. It's supposed to be very simplistic. But I think it stepped back when it came from Metro, because the Windows 8 Metro UI, although it had its problems, as a UI on its own, it was fantastic. It was very complete. It just felt like a complete sort of thing. Whereas Windows 10 currently, kind of, it's not finished here, it's a bit rough there. That looks great. Like, I mean, Groove Music, one of the best looking apps on Windows 10, I think we would all agree. Then you've got things like the messaging app, which I know isn't used right now, but it just looks ugly. It's a horrible app. There's a lot of just, some things look great, other things don't look great. And hopefully with Project Neon, as we say here, Microsoft is looking to also fix these inconsistencies, as right now developers are kind of able to create their own hamburger menus and app bars and window UIs and whatever else. And again, that kind of makes for a clunky experience. For example, some apps have a different context menu from others, which used to be a really big problem when Windows 10 was first released. Microsoft has kind of tackled this over Redstone Threshold 2 and Redstone 1, but it's still there. Developers are still kind of not certain on which context menus they can use or should be using as a standard. Hopefully Project Neon tackles this by laying out strict guidelines for developers to follow. So this is a context menu. This is what the context menu should look like. This is its behaviors and so on and so forth. Same for hamburger menus and whatnot. And then again, like you say, it's supposed to expand across HoloLens. And that should be pretty interesting, because how do you build a UI that works on a flat screen and in the 3D environment? It's a big challenge for Microsoft, and it should be really interesting to see what they come up with.
Yeah, the 3D part is real important. I didn't really mention so much that in the augmented reality and the HoloLens stuff. But yeah, these elements need to be 3D. They're going to have like possibly shadows, and how that whole thing, the lighting, dynamic lighting, how that happens is, I think, what's being addressed here, as well as the smoother animations. And I agree. I've been telling Microsoft for a while that the OS, it works, obviously, but it lacks sort of a soul to it. It doesn't really feel that it has much personality. There was this delightful feature of Windows Phone 7 that a lot of people enjoyed, where it just was fun to use, and the way the animations happen. And iOS still does a really good job with the animations, both in their execution, but also in how they have very high frame rates. So it's a very smooth and, unique experience that even Android struggles a little bit with. And so I think they need a little bit more of that refinement to the OS. And I think this is going to be a combination of some polish, some more animations, and also, but, taking it to that next level of 3D augmented reality and HoloLens, basically where Windows 10 is going to probably live in the future. And I think that's really, Microsoft seems to be really doubling down on AR, VR, AI, and all that stuff as being the future of computing. And when you think about it, it's actually not that, crazy. If you go back to everybody points to Minority Report from years ago and how people always envision computers, the computer of the future, right? Apparently it's going to be like a clear glass display with UI elements that just appear on it and you'll be able to interact with them. Like, people have been envisioning something like that for a long time. And I think Microsoft is just like, well, we're going to actually just do that now. Like, it's time. The technology's there, or it's going to be there, and we're going to start to build this stuff now for that. Because it's an interesting question. It's like, you can't just keep making this stuff in movies and then we're all still on laptops and these old screen kind of devices. So how do you get from that to the next level? And I think that's what all this is.
Well, when we were first learning about Project Neon, we were told that the UI would also be able to expand out of the windows. So, for example, you get a window, and then as things can expand out of that window. Now, when I first read that, I assumed sideways, because my mind was stuck in the 2D environment. We hadn't learned about the HoloLens part of this yet. Now we know about the HoloLens side of things. Perhaps that means not just sideways, but, forwards and backwards. Imagine wearing a HoloLens, looking at a screen and having an app open and then being able to sort of tilt your head sideways and see elements within that app that are coming forward that you can 3D and see them as objects. That's pretty interesting. That are hooked to windows rather than directly with the HoloLens itself. That's a very interesting concept. So imagine having a hamburger menu that sits on the thing, but it's not in the window. It's
a hamburger menu that's
window.
A real hamburger.
Exactly. Just weird things like that. That would be very interesting. And that also makes HoloLens kind of useful in a sense, because I know, and I'm kind of in the same mindset. It's kind of the reason why I haven't decided if I want to buy a HoloLens yet. HoloLens right now is kind of a toy. It's kind of here's what HoloLens is.
It's a dev tool.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. It's not really, people aren't buying this for... People aren't going, I need a HoloLens, I need it to do work, I need it to be productive, and so on and so forth. But with this element, with the whole being, apps can expand out of the window and stuff, I think that gives HoloLens a purpose. And I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming more clear now that HoloLens, as is this $3,000 piece of hardware, is meant as almost the prototype-based device for developers to work off of, but what actually... it's going to hit the consumer market. It's going to look very different. It's going to be something smaller, lighter. We're going to start to see it with these VR headsets that are coming to market in the next few months. And, and what actually we use in real life is going to be actually sort of different than what HoloLens is today. Because there's always been this question people aren't going to spend $3,000 on this thing. And Microsoft's never really said that they were, right? But they had to get this hardware out there, because you can't just talk about Windows 10 holographic in the abstract for developers. You need to give them an affordable tool that they can actually experience. And Microsoft's going to take the data that they're getting back from devs to build more stuff out of this. But it's a way to prototype stuff. And I think Microsoft's approach to hardware now has been very interesting, even with Surface Studio, which seems off the top, a huge hit already. But still, they're taking it very slow in terms of rollout and making sure if there's any problems, they can be fixed. And their new, this is very different from how Surface Pro 1 went, which was this massive launch, and there were lines, and there were tons of devices available. And of course, they didn't sell very well, and they were stuck with the inventory. We all know that story. But I think if they could go back and redo that, they would have done a much smaller release of Surface, and kind of like what they're doing now with all their new hardware. So yeah, the more Zach and I learn about what's coming in Windows 10, or at least we should say what Microsoft wants to do, it's pretty insane. So there's a lot more that we'll talk about over the coming weeks that we'll probably reveal a bit. The problem, of course, is there's a lot that they want to do, and then what happens is after the proposal stage, when it starts to get into the planning stage, things get cut. And it's not because they don't want to do them, it's just simple engineering and time. If you need to do, so a lot of the stuff we're talking about here today with Project Neon involves the shell team as well as the UI team. And they already have things to do. And so, if you have that one group tasked with something and then you give them something else, there needs to be a prioritization there. So sometimes things do get cut, and that's where we have to sort of think about, their plans. But there's a lot coming. There's a lot that they want to do with Windows 10. And it's, like I said, you got to think of this as an OS for the next, 2 to 5 years. But I don't know. It's pretty fascinating, that's for sure. They're very ambitious with Windows 10.
You know, it is very exciting. Like you mentioned there, like some of the things get cut. This is a thing that happens all the time within Microsoft, to things that we don't even know about. So Microsoft is very ambitious in terms of, they're like, we want to do this, we want to do that. Some of it leaks, and then when it turns out some of those things don't end up showing up, people get disappointed. But internally, this was just ideas on a wall, and like maybe Microsoft wants to do them, but whether they eventually come through or not is a different story. Project Neon is a little bit further ahead than that. We know Project Neon's been in the works for about a year, maybe longer. So with the beginnings of it showing up in Resident 2, we doubt that that's going to happen at this point. But things like Home Hub, which was a thing that many people were expecting to show up in October, didn't. And that's because Home Hub was an idea that Microsoft had. They had a proposal, they had plans, they started working on it. Then as time progressed, they realized, oh, hang on a minute, this, and this isn't really going to fit with what we're planning to do right now. So let's cut this, and this, and let's do this, and this with it instead. Home Hub is a much bigger project that I think we're going to be talking about more next week.
Right.
But for now, that's just, I mean, a lot of the Band 3, another thing that got cancelled. Like, yeah, they were working on stuff, but whether they wanted to release it or not is another story. And it's a shame indeed, but there's a lot more that Microsoft works on that even we don't know about, that they cancel all the time.
And we should point out, we'll give a little teaser with Home Hub at least, that what's been kind of talked about in the press recently about it hasn't been very accurate. It's not an Amazon Echo competitor. It's not a Google Home competitor. It is, but it isn't. It's not, this idea that they're just going to release like a small speaker-like device and call it Cortana Home or something like that. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were basically saying, well, that sounds like very much like a Me Too device. And I would agree completely, and I think so would Microsoft, because that's not at all what was planned. And that's not all, and we know this is still coming. It's been changed a little bit, and perhaps the timeline's been extended a little bit. But if you think about what the limitations are with Home Hub, not Home Hub, but Amazon Echo and Google Home, think about those limitations. Like, what can't you do on those devices? And it's actually kind of a lot. And how could something like Windows 10 make that better? And so that's kind of a little teaser of like what we'll talk about a little bit about next week. But Microsoft has a plan for the home stuff, and it's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like I saw a few reports this week, I think it was, or at least late last week, saying Home Hub is not a Amazon Echo competitor. It isn't, but it kind of is. There's a lot to it, which is what we're trying to get here. It's not a dedicated device. It's software, first and foremost, but there's what Microsoft are planning with the software kind of makes it awesome. And whether that stuff shows up, because we've heard conflicting things about what the plans are for it. We're going to detail what their plans are, but whether or not a lot of it shows up is another story.
Right. So with that, I guess I should talk about, this thing, the HP laptop, which we'll have a video and mini review for that. I think probably Monday we'll probably run that. I got to write it up. I shot a lot of video with Mark this week, so but with the holiday he's got to edit things. So, but been using a laptop for the last few days. It's an interesting device. And to give you a preview of the review for it, I'll just say this: what HP did with the hardware is fantastic. Like, I don't think they could have done a better job with this device. Now, at $600, it's certainly super expensive. And if it came down to a consumer going, hey, I have like $600, $800 I could get that or like a laptop, what should I get? It would be really hard for me to tell you, go get this thing. It's not consumer level ready, but it's really neat. I guess if you have disposable income and money doesn't matter, sure, go buy it for the fun of it. But it's really meant for like enterprise, and it's a secondary display for your phone for the Elite X3, although it does work with 915 XL just as well. I mean, it's just Continuum. It's a secondary larger display and keyboard for when you're out and about and you need to do a long email, write a Word document, edit PowerPoint, do that kind of stuff. It looks like a computer. It kind of behaves like one, but there's still significant limitations. Any issues I've had with it right now is purely, I'm going to say, in Microsoft's work with Windows 10 Mobile. But we're expecting a lot of continuum improvements with RS2 and the Creators Update, some of which have been detailed so far and some I don't think have. But I think a lot of it's going to be under the hood stuff. And I think as this evolves, it's really fascinating technology. It's cool to use. It definitely works better wired than wireless, which is a bit of a shame.
I mean, that's a given, though. I mean, most things in life work better wired than wireless.
Yeah. But ideally you want to like leave the phone in your pocket. You just open this thing and
that's the goal with what Microsoft demoed with some of their new continuum improvements. One of the features they listed was you just have your phone in your pocket, your laptop or your receiver notices your phone is in the area and just boots up continuum wirelessly. That's a great idea in theory, but when you consider like interference and lagginess and all that, it turns into this, I'd just rather plug it in.
Yeah, so like one of the things you'll notice is like when you're using wireless continuum, it uses Miracast and the frame rate drops down to, I believe it's 30 frames per second as opposed to 60 frames per second when you're wired. And you really notice this when you're scrolling the start menu. It gets really kind of janky wireless apps. It's that experience of like running an old computer where like you click an app and then there's like a second delay and then it launches, so it's kind of like that. When it's wired, it definitely works better, but there's still a few quirks. Every once in a while I'll plug it in and the mouse cursor won't show up, so I have to unplug it, plug it back in again, and then it's there. I've had the sound not go through for some times, so there's definitely some bugs, but when it works, it's actually pretty awesome. Like, I have to admit, I do use it like on the couch. Like I'll be sitting there and like, phone, I'll see a tweet come in or I have an email. I could just do it on the phone, but thumb typing is just never as fun. This is why people still go, Microsoft should release a mobile device with a keyboard on it. Because people know that touch typing just still doesn't feel as fast and productive as a full-on keyboard. And the keyboard on this is fantastic. It's just like the Surface Pro 4's keyboard. I mean, I'm talking about the same response of the key and how it feels when it bounces back up, and just the typing on it feels very much. I'm pretty sure they worked with Microsoft on some of this, if they had to. If not, then just kudos to their team. The display is also really good. It's a bezel-less display, and it's matte, and it just continuum. It just looks really sharp on there. Like it looks like a normal computer when you're using it. There's no artifacting or anything, and the trackpad is pretty good too. And I point that out because the trackpad was not part of Continuum. Like, if you think about it, it was meant for a mouse and keyboard and a display, but there was no trackpad, which, if you've used laptops before, they can vary greatly. So there needs to be some driver creation there and tweaking. And so HP had to like kind of work a lot on that to make it good. And it's one of the reasons why it was delayed. And it's still not perfect, but it's a pretty good experience. And so it's really neat as like a version 1.0 of a new technology. This is something where in 2 years you can totally see this as like being a thing as the hardware and the software catch up with each other. Right now, it's like one of those, if you could afford it and get it, sure. But it's not something I would recommend just for regular consumers. It's not something I would go out there and boast to, consumers and being like, hey, you could just forget your laptop, and get this thing instead. We're not there yet, but this stuff has to start somewhere, and you have to create the hardware, put it out there, get feedback, and go on from there. And that's what HP is doing. And like I said, I don't think they could have done a better job with this hardware. It's just, between the phone and the actual laptop, it's just phenomenal. It's really just well designed. Now we're just waiting on Microsoft to sort of catch up.
It always seems to be the case. It's always Microsoft's fault. Microsoft are just behind when it comes to Windows 10 Mobile. And it pulls down OEMs. HP are troopers. They are doing a lot of work with Windows 10 Mobile. They're working closely with Microsoft on the software and stuff and the optimizations. And kudos to them, because like other OEMs like Samsung and HTC would be like, we're not even going to mess with that. That's just too much work for us. HP are like putting the extra, pair of hands in and are actually getting on with it and just putting up with whatever they got. They're even providing change logs for their firmware updates that are actually detailed and have known issues. This is amazing. That's crazy. Did Microsoft ever provide like detailed change logs for their firmware updates?
They had a little bit. Yeah, they had some, but they weren't quite as detailed as this. But HP was kind enough to provide us. So which mentioned that too. The Elite X3 had its third firmware update this week. So basically every month since it's come out, every 5 weeks or so, it seems like they put out a firmware update, which is really cool because the Elite X3 doesn't go through any carrier, so now there's literally no barriers, right? They have basically one ROM, so they can just push this update out whenever they want to. And they've been doing that. And this update was less, I don't want to say impressive than the last two firmwares, but, especially the first firmware was like so needed, right? Because there's just a lot wrong. But now we're getting to the point where it's like the phone is pretty solid, and so it's like you're not experiencing as many problems, so the firmware doesn't seem to fix as much stuff, and that's kind of where we are right now. Like I don't notice like a huge change a lot of stuff. Although there's like little things, right? When you pull down the Action Center, now it tells you detailed information for your carrier info, your connection stuff. They did enable, which is really interesting. I still haven't tried it yet. 3G for the second SIM, which is really interesting. Only because according to comments, the 915 XL only have 2G. So Microsoft doesn't even have this. And I don't know if that's because of the chipset. I believe it's probably related to the Snapdragon 820 and something just that it can do that the 810 and 808 can't do. I could be wrong on that, but that's a plausible explanation.
It's very clear that HP are doing, or attempting at least, to do things to the OS that Microsoft aren't. Because one of the early beta firmwares that were never released to the public for the early X3 had a thing called Iris Preview, which kind of hacked the lock screen, so half of it would show your eyes when you're using the iris scanner to log in. Microsoft apparently told HP, no, don't do that. We want the experience to be streamlined across all of our devices.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'm hoping that HP can do, and hopefully Microsoft let them, is disable that second SIM card slot, because I don't use the dual SIM feature. I use one SIM and the micro SD card, but Windows 10 Mobile has no option to disable that second slot, so the cellular connectivity, although there's no SIM in there, it's always waiting for something, and it's supplying CPU usage or whatever else to it. And that's annoying because I'm not using it and it's just wasted resources. I'd rather just turn it off and not have it used.
People just don't like the little cross out.
It's just like, go away. I don't want that second one there. It says, I know I don't have a SIM in it. Don't show me that. I know it's not in there. But oh well.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's one of those things where it's like, they'll probably get around to that, but it's definitely not a priority for them. But I agree 100%. And HP told me that regarding the Iris Preview, which of course we leaked, that wasn't like something they were promoting. But yeah, it came down to Microsoft has this vision of Windows 10 Mobile being a similar experience across all devices. And if OEMs start like customizing crazy aspects of it, like the Iris Preview, what does that mean for customers then who buy a different type of mobile device and they don't have that there, So it's something, from my understanding, it's not that Microsoft is completely saying no to it, but there is discussions going on about how to proceed with these kind of things. There definitely is that fine line between, being able to customize the OS and for your device versus, breaking away from the paradigm. But,
Alexander in the comments is asking, does the laptop work with a Lumia 950 or any Continuum enabled device?
It does. Sure, yeah.
Amazing.
It's better with the Snapdragon 820. Right. Obviously, you get a little bit more RAM, a little bit more power. But yeah, you can use it with that. I wouldn't necessarily, unless you just have tons of money, but I wouldn't recommend buying it unless, like I said, if you just have the cash, you just want a toy. Sure, it's kind of fun. It is a neat device. It just feels awesome to use, but it's not like, I have my XPS 13 next to it, or the Spectre X360. Like I would rather use that. And there's also the issue with the battery stuff, which is kind of interesting. When you're plugged in, of course, you're going to drain the battery from the lap dock, but it'll charge your phone. But it's not quick charge 2.0 or 3.0. It's basically a trickle charge, which means at the best case scenario, you may pick up 1 or 2% for battery, but you're not going to gain like a real positive charge. What you most likely do is either sustain your charge on your phone, or you might lose some, but not as much as if you're just using it wireless. And so, that's something I think a lot of people are surprised about who have gotten this device so far. It's not like if you're using the Continuum to desk dock. Now the desk dock is Quick Charge 3.0. So when you plug your phone in there and you're using Continuum, you will not only be able to use the full Continuum feature, but you will rapidly charge that device. And that's because you have an unlimited power supply, obviously, but it doesn't work quite like that in the lap dock. So the lap dock is a little bit more of, you're just out in the field, you need to sit down and just bang out, an article or a response to an email or something like that. So it's meant for, a triage sort of situation, but it's not like, someone gave you an XPS 13, you'd probably enjoy that a little bit more.
I mean, the lap dock experience right now, as we've said, is kind of limited to Windows 10 Mobile's lack of being able to run Win32 apps. The Windows Store apps are okay, but there's not many there, and a lot of them are very empty compared to full desktop alternatives. But that could be changing with Redstone 3.
Right. And there's also the stuff with the window. Oh yeah, so I guess that's a nice.
I tried.
That's a nice fade into Cobalt, which was something that Mary Jo Foley broke some details on this week. Now, Zach and I have been hearing about Cobalt for probably like
a long time.
6 weeks.
It's a long time. We tried so hard to find out what it was. It was like people were telling us different things. Like I just give up.
Yeah, so we knew it was something to be excited about. We were told, but it was we were lacking a lot of the details, and that's always the tricks to this stuff. You rarely find the person who knows everything about a project that's being worked on and can tell you, and who's also willing to tell you everything.
Right.
And so that's always a risk. But explain what we think it is, because we're still not 100% certain on this stuff, but at least the idea of being presented, if accurate, is pretty fascinating.
So it appears Microsoft are looking at bringing Win32 emulation to ARM64 to be specific. So that's the Snapdragon 820 and above, I believe. I'm not entirely sure if this specific feature will work on the 820. I assume it will, but if not, definitely the 835, which was recently announced by Qualcomm. So basically, Continuum right now it runs Windows Universal apps. It doesn't run Win32 apps at all, so you can't run Chrome, Google Chrome, you can't run Firefox, Internet Explorer, Photoshop, any other Win32 app you can think of. It won't run it. It can do so via virtualization, which is different from emulation. Virtualization is more, it connects to a virtual machine somewhere located in the world, which is running on actual hardware, and does it like that. That's what HP does right now with the Elite X3 and its HP workspace. Emulating this would be different. It would be launching the app locally on your device and having Windows 10 Mobile emulate the Win32 files needed to run it. So you could launch Google Chrome. It would appear in your apps list when in continuum mode, and you could click it and it would launch. It wouldn't be as fluent and amazing as it would be on a normal desktop or laptop, of course, because it is being emulated after all. And emulation isn't always amazing. And with it being ARM64, although they are more powerful, it is still a mobile processor after all. But I assume it'll work in that kind of similar sense as it does on Xbox One with the Xbox 360 games, because Microsoft originally said, "Oh, this is impossible. We could never have Xbox 360 games on Xbox One." Then they went ahead and built emulation that made it happen. And I'm assuming they've gone down a similar path here with Windows 10 Mobile and Win32 emulation. The reason we know about this now is because Walking Cat on Twitter saw references to CHPE, which Mary Jo says stands for C stands for Cobalt, which is the codename we heard. HP possibly stands for the company HP, or HP, as Dan says. And then E could either be for the Elite X3 or emulation. So there's a kind of toss-up between what that could stand for. Regardless, it's a thing that Microsoft are looking into and has in the plans for Redstone 3. Again, with a lot of these things, they can be delayed, cancelled, so on and so forth. But it is interesting to see Microsoft looking at this. Now, they have said in the past that they would be looking at this in the future. They've said many times in like public question and answer times that, hey, Continuum sucks. Are you going to add Win32 support? And they go, yeah, we're looking at it. It's a thing that we know is a problem, whatever. And now this kind of confirms that they are actually putting code down for it. I'm just curious to see how it will perform on an 820 or an 835, because it's like it is a mobile chip after all. It's not a full-on desktop CPU or laptop CPU. It is a mobile chip.
So there's so much here that we just don't know about, including the origins of this stuff. So I have heard in the past that Microsoft was exploring an Intel x86 chip solution for mobile. Obviously, Intel pulled out of that. And I heard that did set them back like a year. And that may be part of the explanation of why their mobile situation seems a little bit more chaotic. There are certainly decisions Microsoft has made in the past that definitely have affected where we are today in mobile. I also think there's things that have happened to them, like Intel pulling out, that may have also caused effects that they weren't anticipating. So I'm wondering now, if like where Continuum is going today, say with the virtualization stuff, with the cloud, and now we're talking about virtualization stuff on the device itself, if this is, reworking around the fact that they can't do x86 directly somehow, and that may be why this stuff sort of seems chaotic a bit. Now, regarding the question of like if the mobile chips are powerful enough to run it, because that's certainly a really good question, because right now, even running Continuum
Right.
on a second display is not like faster than running Windows Phone 7 on the phone, right? I mean, there's still some delay there, and what I was talking about with the performance. So now you throw in x86. So now I'm starting to wonder if we're going to start to see display docks or lap docks that have external GPU support, because this is something that's happening in the industry right now. It's focused on gaming and high-end devices like Razer are doing it. I believe Alienware has one too. And so that seems to be, I've talked about this before, this modularization of computing. The idea of you just, Kangaroo is really good at this. You buy a little device and you can attach other ones to it. And so I'm wondering if, we already know that supposedly you can only run these x86 virtualized apps when docked, right, in Continuum. So you're already adding this sort of hardware requirement. And if you have some sort of external GPU attached to that will help then power those devices and that software. I'm wondering if that's an angle. We just don't know. We don't know much about how this is supposed to work, what the goals are, what the limitations are, and also what the hardware, a lot of people say like, oh, Microsoft should have done this stuff years ago, which to me is hilarious because a lot of the stuff that they're trying to do now, the hardware didn't exist years ago. Like they're building, and in a lot of ways, they're building out a vision where the hardware needs to catch up to it. And that's HoloLens. That's a lot of stuff that's happening in mobile right now. So I don't know. We have to kind of, I guess, wait and see. But it's, that's a problem they need to solve. And I know they're aware of it. They see UWP as the future. They want everybody to run Universal Windows app. We did see this week Project Centennial with Photoshop Elements arrive in the store. I'm a big fan of Elements myself. So we're starting to see that happen. But it's going to take years for companies to not only write UWP apps, but it also the UWP platform itself needs to catch up to Win32. There's a lot of APIs missing, a lot of stuff. Even the stuff with Project Neon is going to be a part of that. And so there's a lot going on, and they need to have something for this Win32, canyon that we're in right now before we sort of get out of it.
It's becoming very clear that Win32 is definitely a thing of the past with Project Neon and the Windows 10 UI and universal apps and just the HoloLens and everything Microsoft is doing today. None of it benefits Win32 anymore because Win32 is old. Microsoft aren't still building upon, they're not adding, hey, Win32 has new features today. They don't really advertise it if there is any new features. Everything is being focused on the new platform model, which is universal this, universal that, universal everything. So for them, I don't know why Microsoft are working on Win32 emulation. I assumed that they were just lying to people when they said that because they would just keep them quiet until UWP flourished, and then people realized, oh yeah, we didn't need Win32 anyway. But they're working on it, which is a surprise to me. And I understand because Windows 10 Mobile, its focus is business right now, and businesses need that legacy support. I get that. I'm just sad that they have to get that.
Sure. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, yeah, there's going to be a lot of resources spent on that kind of stuff, trying to make Win32 fit onto mobile. Now it won't actually run on the phone itself. You're not going to run a full desktop app on a 5.5-inch display. But this idea of in Continuum, could you do that kind of stuff?
I think a lot of this had to depended on Microsoft actually making the Continuum environment more desktop orientated, because Continuum right now, and when it initially came out, was very limited. The taskbar was limited, the start menu was limited, everything was limited. There was no pop-up notifications, no windowed mode, obviously. And obviously with Redstone 2 or 3, Microsoft are adding windowed mode. They're making the Continuum environment basically identical to what it looks like on a desktop. So windowed mode, title bars, tray, system tray, icon, everything. And I assume that was what they needed first before they could even think about adding Win32 emulation, because obviously Win32 apps, they kind of depend on a lot of things that may seem obvious and other things that don't seem obvious at all, like behind the scenes DLLs and codes and whatever else that just Windows 10 Mobile doesn't carry right now. So it was going to be very interesting to see how they pull this off, if they end up pulling this off.
Yeah. Again, Microsoft has huge plans for Windows 10, mobile, HoloLens, and all that kind of stuff. So we're just starting to see bits of that plan for RS2, RS3, RS4. Some of the stuff is long term. It's going to get cut. It'll be adjusted. But, this is a platform that they're just building off of. And it's, if you think about it, the Universal Windows platform is just over a year old. That's really new for a new system to be in place. So still lots to happen here. But, we'll continue to dig. But right now we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, I think. And there's still many questions.
I think a lot of people are just surprised that Microsoft actually has plans for Windows 10 Mobile. We've been saying it for a while. Windows 10 Mobile isn't dead. Nobody said that, and everyone's like, "Hang on a minute, they're working on features for Windows 10 Mobile." Yes, they are, and there's more coming as well, and not just emulation. Emulation, like Dan says, is the tip of the iceberg.
I think this has to do with the fact that people just consumers right now can't escape when they think of mobile as just being a phone. And just a phone that runs app. And as soon as you tell them, no, it's going to be something more than that, their mind starts to shake. They don't know what that means. It's like, what are you talking about? This is all we know. This is all we have. And Microsoft is basically saying, no, we're trying to create a new category of device here. And that's weird for people because, as I said in the past, Surface Studio, Surface Book, Surface Pro 4 are all devices that you didn't know you wanted until Microsoft showed it to you. And that's really the secret here of creating a category. And so you have to think of like whatever they do in mobile will be something similar to that. It's something, it's familiar, but also different, so we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited with what Microsoft has planned, and it's like, it's super interesting to see that Microsoft actually cares about mobile people, because for a while it felt like they didn't, but they do.
Right.
Moving on, I have a new laptop, and so do you. Actually, we'll talk about the new Dell as well. But first up, the HP Spectre X360, new for this year. This is the late 2016 model. Dan already has one, and I think he's reviewing it right now.
Yeah, we shot the video this week, so that's coming next week. Yeah,
but I've also got one because Dan got a spare and he decided to give me one. So yay! And
well, you need something to run insider builds, right?
I do need something to run insider builds. This is I think it's one of the top specs. Core i7, 16 gigs of RAM. It's beautiful. When Dan first got his, he did say that this could be laptop of the year, and I agree with him. Although he now thinks the Surface Book Performance Base is laptop of the year. I guess since it's new and I'm still in that honeymoon period, I really do think this is a beautiful device and could be my contender for laptop of the year. It's an X360 device, so it does flip round and turn into a tablet, although I probably won't be using it as that ever. It is really, really nice. Windows Hello support, which is a big bonus for me. I cannot use a device that doesn't have Windows Hello. Once you use Windows Hello, you can't go back. And I really love it. It's super fast. It boots up super quick. Since my Surface Book is a Core i5, it's one of the low-end Surface Books, which I regret getting now. This just blows it out of the water. It's Kaby Lake, super fast. It's just amazing, and I am really, really liking it. Too bad it's the US model, so that silly
you get the
short
stuff.
Enter key is ridiculous. But it's really nice.
No, HP did a really fantastic job. My thing with this device is the price point. It's I believe I didn't check the price today. I know Best Buy had it on sale this week for $11.99, which was $100 cheaper. And that's crazy because even at $12.99, this is the Core i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 512 gigabytes of storage version, which is basically spec'd out for an Ultrabook that's super light. It only has a full HD display, which is funny because I don't mind that at all. But Mark is when we're shooting the video, he's super crazy. He wants 4K everything. But then I was like, no, listen, it's a really good full HD display though. And when he saw it, he's like, wow, those colors look really, really nice on it. I'm like, yeah, if you do full HD right, you're not going to be craving, especially in a 13-inch device, you're not going to be craving QHD or 4K. But display is fantastic. Yeah, you get the dual IR cameras for Windows Hello, which is unique. It's just, and the battery life's great. The typing experience is really good on it too.
Very nice. It's very clicky. I like that.
Yeah.
One of the complaints...
trackpad.
Yeah, I have two issues. The trackpad is Synaptics, which sucks. And I know not many people can tell the difference. I can definitely tell the difference between Precision and Synaptics. It's just not as good. It's very it just feels a little bit slower. I don't know what it is. It's hard to describe, but you can definitely tell the difference.
The gestures, because you can. Yes. What's kind of cool, at least with the Synaptics, you can configure this to make it feel very similar to Precision, but there are still some differences. So you can still do the 3-finger gestures to swipe up and everything, but there is almost like a slight delay when you do that, and it's not quite as fast as like Surface Book, which to me is still the pinnacle of Precision touchpages.
I will give the touchpad one thing though. I like the click it does. It's a very satisfying click when you click down,
right?
Which is a bonus, I guess.
Yeah, and being all metal too, and the 4 speakers are pretty awesome. Really good audio.
The other thing that I want to complain about is, although the Full HD display looks fine and is perfect, the display scaling by default is a bit too high. It makes all the elements look huge, and you might as well be using a device with 1366 by 768 with that screen real estate. So I lowered it to 125%, which is far better. It makes it look far more usable. But Win32 apps, at least some of them, don't listen to that at all, and they just make it really small. So Slack, for example, the UI looks nice around with your the start bar, the start menu, and universal app. Great. Slack looks awful.
But in Slack, you can manually control the size.
Can you really?
Yes, Control Plus, Control Minus will adjust the font size in Slack.
Incredible. I'll try it right now. Talk about the new Dell.
Yeah, so, but yeah, I agree. So stay tuned for our full review this week, or if you're listening to this podcast, it'll probably be out now on Windows Central. I haven't really got to, so the Dell out the box, I had to update it up to whatever the latest anniversary update is. This is the Rose Gold version, which I also have the previous gold one, so it's a little bit different. The previous gold one is true gold, and this one's a slight reddish hue, but it looks really nice. This does not have the iris graphics, which is what the gold one signified the last time, was a little bit more powerful. So this that's because Kaby Lake Iris, as far as I know, is not out yet. So it does use the 620 graphics, which is part of Kaby Lake instead. But yeah, there's not a lot of difference between this and the previous Dell XPS 13. So we won't do like a full review, but we'll definitely do some benchmarks and a closer look at the battery, which should be better. They also did replace the Wi-Fi. Now it's Killer Wireless, which, if you're familiar, they're used mostly in gaming laptops. My Razer has Killer Wireless. It's supposed to be a little bit better. It's more modern. It does higher bandwidth and everything. I haven't been able to test that necessarily, but the XPS 13, it's really hard when you ask people, oh, what's the best laptop out there? Like I said, obviously Surface Book, but my caveat with that, it's like, the one I tested costs $3,300. Most people can't afford that. So when you look at something like the maxed out Spectre X360, it's like $1,299. You can get it for $1,199. It's like less than half the cost of that. And then you have the XPS 13. And so the XPS 13 is just really good for people who don't want a 2-in-1, like a device that flips around, like the X360. Like you said, you don't really use the X360 as a tablet, in which case like an XPS 13 would be just as good for you too. But they are built very differently, right? The X360s is all metal, it's very thin, it has a wider base to it, whereas the XPS 13 is a much smaller device, metal on the outside, but soft touch on the inside. So it all kind of depends what you want, but you can also get QHD touchscreen with the XPS 13, but there's no Windows Hello, so that's...
it's always a trade-off. So
Dell,
sad.
I know Dell's going to be on board with the Windows Hello stuff, but a lot of these companies have to sort of come up with their own solution for it. They could just, of course, take a fingerprint scanner and put it in there, but I'm not really sure what Dell's plans are here for that. That's my one ding on this laptop. It's not a huge deal because the rest of it, in my opinion, makes up for it. But, it's really hard to get around the fact that the XPS 13 is just such an iconic device now for Dell. And I think they just did a fantastic job. And so with Kaby Lake, I expect to have really good battery life with this device. I think this will get better battery life than the X360 does. So if that's important to you, I'll go with the Dell. If you really want to push it, go with the Full HD matte version, which would get even better battery life than the QHD Touch. Plus, you'll save some money. So it's really good stuff out there these days.
By the way, you're a genius. Your tip worked.
Yeah, of course.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, this is amazing. But yeah, no, the battery life on the Spectre isn't bad by any means, but obviously the Dell will get better. I think the Dell's got a bigger battery in it, that's why.
Right. Yeah, they increased it to a 60 watt hour battery
Right.
with this
It's
edition.
pretty big.
So.
How big's the one in the Surface Book Performance base? 90?
71.
90, where'd I get 90 from? I don't know. That's
Yeah,
big. That's a big battery.
Yeah, they did pretty incredible job with that one. So it's a pretty big battery in there. But
Yeah, I mean, I think the moral of the story here is there are a lot of good devices out there right now. I mean, Microsoft, with their Surface line, kind of encouraged the entire industry to start making premium devices, and it shows. Like, years ago, HP were making rubbish. Like, HP, when people mention HP, they think of rubbish plastic laptops. Now it's an entirely different story.
Yep. Yeah, they're all doing very well, and they all give very good support. If you notice, your Spectre X360 has a little HP program in it that will auto update things for BIOS and drivers, and they do it. They do pretty regularly. Even Samsung does this. Dell has it too, and they're all pretty good with like upgrading firmwares and BIOSes every couple of weeks, adding new drivers and improving things. It's very different from what it was years ago, where you'd have to go to the website and dig around. Now it's like it doesn't go through Windows Update, which would be the real ideal solution, but it's still way better than what it was, and we're just seeing a lot better support in terms of this hardware now. And things like Kaby Lake are really nice. You'll notice on the X360, it gets very good performance. It's clocked slightly faster, and the battery life is pretty solid with it too. Although the X360, you can hear the fan come on once in a while.
Yeah, I've seen a few people complain. The fan does come on more often than not, and it is audible, so keep that in mind.
Yeah.
One of the other things,
it's not annoying,
no,
but you
it
do
is there.
hear it. Yeah.
One of the other things, it does get hot though, so I mean, I'm glad it does come on. Otherwise, it will burn your fingers. Otherwise,
yeah. We think it's a Core i7, and that's the number device. It's
and 16 gigs of RAM. There's a lot in there. One of the other things, it doesn't get the anniversary update yet. I think HP said that they were working to push it out this month, and they've only got 5 days left. You can install the anniversary update on it manually, either via the upgrade tool or just clean install, which is what I did. And it works just fine. I'm not entirely sure what HP are working for exactly, but once you install, I installed clean, and I had to download the Wi-Fi driver because it doesn't have the Wi-Fi driver working if you do a clean install. Then obviously install that, then just check for updates, and it just downloads everything for you. It takes a few minutes, obviously, because there's a few updates from Microsoft themselves to download as well. But then once that does its reboots and whatnot, it'll perfectly working device. So if you own one of these and are waiting for the anniversary update, I wouldn't say I recommend just forcing it down, but if you want it and need it, then that is an option for you.
We should also talk about other things for laptops. Mark reviewed the Yoga 910 this week, and he really, really liked that device. I do too. I used it only for the first time a couple weeks ago at the Microsoft store. They had it there, and I hadn't seen that device up until that point. And I admit, I was tempted to almost buy one. I was there for the Razer, though, and I ended up going for the Razer, of course. But yeah, that's a all-metal device, and I was surprised about how fast it was. It also comes with a Core i7, or you can get it with a Core i7 Kaby Lake, and performance on it was just really nice. The display quality was great. Once again, Lenovo, I think, did a really good job with that, and they improved the keyboard. They fixed a lot of things I think that people had issues with. So there's that review that's already out this coming week, which if you listen to this podcast recorded, should be hitting the site. We got the Spectre X360. I think we may have the Razer reviews there for Razer Blade. Mark is mostly doing that review, but I do a cameo on his video because I have the full HD version. He has the QHD. So I talk about my experience there, and I'll also be writing a part of that review. And then we also have the laptop and Surface Dial, which you got the Surface Dial too, right?
Yeah, I've got the Surface Dial. It's very cute. And it's surprisingly useful as somebody who isn't an artist. It has a few functions built in by default: volume control, scrubbing, so you can scrub through music and movies, skipping tracks,
scrolling on websites.
I love the scrolling thing, actually. It's really nice to just be able to scroll with one hand and just click on things with the other. It's very nice. And it's very smooth, the scrolling as well.
Right. And so that's, and I'll do a video kind of review of some of that stuff too this week. But that's the important thing with Surface Dial is the granularity and the control with it is leaps and bounds better than using arrow keys, using a mouse, or even using any kind of slider on through the OS. It's just a very smooth experience. So things like scrolling and volume control, brightness, all this kind of stuff is you just have finer control. And it is surprisingly fun to use, even if you're not an artist. But that story of that device is still yet to be written, because developers are now just starting to leverage the APIs and their apps for it. So it should be interesting to see how creative people get with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's about it. Did we want to take any questions? We technically have 6 minutes left.
Yeah, but I think, again, like last week, do it after we wrap up the show, because audio listeners don't care.
Yeah, if you guys want to listen to it live, we're on Fridays, usually at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. But this week we did, I believe, 2 p.m. So that's that. Tune into Windows Central, like I said, for those reviews. We got a lot of stuff coming in the next couple of weeks for that, as well as more scoops. Also, don't forget to read Jez Corden's article on the UI changes coming to Xbox
we forgot
One.
about that entirely.
Yeah, it's a really good article, exclusive stuff. Basically, long story short, they want to get rid of snap mode, which I'm totally fine with. I don't like snap mode. I like the concept behind it, but I don't like the execution.
You know what? Mentioning that, I think it's fall 2017 that's scheduled for, right, those changes? At least that's what I think the article said. That's also Redstone 3. It looks like Redstone 3 is turning out to be a big update for Windows 10, Windows 10 Mobile, and Xbox One. Right. Xbox One, entirely new dashboard, Windows 10 Mobile, emulation, Windows 10, Project Neon. Huge changes up and coming. Very exciting time to be a Microsoft fan or, watcher, or just a Windows user in general.
Yeah. And so I guess they want to do a picture-in-picture type thing, or slide-out menus more for certain elements. So make sure you go and read that with Jez, and tune into the OneCast podcast, where they'll probably talk more about that stuff as well. But very interesting stuff. We got more coming up on Scorpio as well. We've been scooping stuff there. So lots of news to come for Windows 10 in general. But yeah, good times. So thanks for listening. Thanks to the live audience for paying attention and asking questions, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care, everybody.